Okay, great. Welcome everyone to our webinar series with Opera Next Gen. My name is Andre Chung, and I am the artistic director of Opera Next Gen. I am filling in moderation duties as our outreach coordinator, education coordinator is a little under the weather, Calabria, but she's here and can help me along should I completely forget something or miss something. Absolutely. Um, as I said, we are Opera Next Gen, and you can visit our website at operanextgen.org. Our first production of the season is on December 11th of this year. It is Carlos Simon's Night Trip, and it is definitely an evening not to be missed, with a really great cast and a talkback following the production in order to sort of deep dive into some of the more thematic material and everything that goes into sort of new opera and creation. So this is our webinar series, Generation Now, the Portfolio Artists Power Panel. This webinar is sponsored by our generous donor, Jerome Moison. Jerome is a proud sponsor of the arts and Opera Next Gen, and we are grateful for his meaningful contribution. Now, I want to introduce our two guest artists today. First is Dr. Tiffany Jackson. Dr. Tiffany Renee Jackson is a classical jazz singer, a vocal pedagogue, a certified fitness health consultant, natural bodybuilder, motivational speaker, and writer of the one-woman show From the Hood to the Ivy League. She earned a Bachelor of Music from the University of Michigan, Master of Music and Artist Diploma from Yale University School of Music, Professional Studies Certificate from Manhattan School of Music. That's where I got my master's, and a doctor of musical arts from the University of Connecticut. Dr. Jackson was an apprentice with the Houston Grand Opera Studio and was an artist with the Aspen Music Festival, Tanglewood Music Festival, Ravinia Music Festival, the Bath Festival Trust, and has sung at Carnegie Hall. Dr. Jackson can also be heard on the following recordings: Fare You Well, Sweet Perfume in an Alabaster Jar, and A Balm in Gilead with Emmy Award-winning composer Rex Cadwallader, drummer Artie Dixon, and bassist Mike Aceta. Dr. Jackson has appeared on America's Got Talent as the opera singing bodybuilder, and she was chosen to travel to South Africa with Oprah Winfrey. For 3 years, she is an adjunct voice teacher at Choate Rosemary Hall and the president of Gift Passion Purpose Project Incorporated, a nonprofit organization she founded whose mission is to provide mentoring and resources to gifted musicians in underserved communities. To learn more about Dr. Jackson, visit www.necessarydiva.net. Hello, Dr. Jackson.
Hello.
Nice. All right. And then our second panelist today is Rob Raphael. So Rob K. Raphael is a graduate of DePaul University, where he received a Bachelor of Music in Vocal Performance. Rob's musical opportunities include traveling internationally to study language, culture, and music in Urbania, Italy, with the Musica nelle Marche, and San Miguel de Allende, Mexico, Institute of El Canto. And he has performed leading operatic roles, including Pistola in Falstaff, the Superintendent Bud in Albert Herring, Colline in La Boheme, Giove in La Callisto, and has been an soloist in orchestral chamber works, Das Knaben Wunderhorn, The Mahler, and Soundscapes of Color. As an arts administrative specialist, Rob concurrently works at the Lyric Opera of Chicago in the Learning and Creative Engagement Department, sits on the board of La Cacina as Diversity and Community Engagement Advisor, and is an active consultant with the recently formed Black Opera Alliance and Black Administrators of Opera Groups. Rob is the founder and artistic director of Hearing in Color, an organization dedicated to supporting those whose contributions and stories have been historically excluded from classical spaces. He is a current member of the William Ferris Chorale and has been featured as a guest artist, soloist, or speaker on several in-person and virtual events. Rob was also a cast member in the recently released film musical How King. Rob also uses his voice to connect people from different communities as a newly appointed host of Chicago's classical music station WFMT 98.7 FM to continue decentralizing the predominantly white, European, male-centered classical consciousness. So welcome, Rob.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So originally we were going to have Dr. Lori Hicks on our panel, but due to some last-minute scheduling conflict, she is unable to join us. So, for anyone, if you have any questions, feel free to plop them down in the chat and we will find a way to make sure our panelists answer them because, you know, this webinar is for y'all. Okay, so I have a few questions I just figured we'll start off and just get things rolling. So, why don't we start at the beginning for either of you? What inspired you to start singing and to actually study singing itself?
I will start. I always sang, I grew up singing in the Black church, in the Holiness Fire Baptized Pentecostal Church. Not church, church. So, and so singing was not something that I can't remember, not ever singing, and just hearing great singing around me. And singing that was inspired by something much deeper than I had ever imagined, right? The love of God. So I grew up listening to women predominantly singing, Black women singing from their guts, from their souls. So for me, singing from the very beginning always meant something much deeper than the actual sound itself, but the effects that it has on the human condition. So that was my inspiration to sing. Yes. For sure. And I just also wanted to add as well, too, I'm currently an assistant professor of music at Western Carolina University. Yeah, that I just started that position in, oh goodness, in August. So yeah, I wanted to say that. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, very grateful.
Yeah, congratulations, Dr. Jackson. Same, very much same. I grew up singing in church. I mean, my family sings, I say all the time. If we had a dog when I was growing up, the dog would sing. And it just never was not a part of my life. So I started going to school, and when I started, taking choir and things, I became fascinated that there was like a way to sing, or that you could study it, even that you could like learn about music, because everything that had come to me had come from my experiences in church and learning things by rote. And so when somebody said to me, oh yeah, you can learn how to like do certain things in your voice, I was like, that sounds cool, I want to do that. So that's really what motivated me to study music or singing.
Great. Yeah, I mean the church tradition is really cool and really helps incorporate a lot of things that are very interesting for singers themselves. So I mean, along with your church tradition, like what continues to keep you singing? What continues motivating you to want to keep using your voice to support your art form and your endeavors?
Yeah, I would say it's interesting because I also agree with Rob. It's like learning how to do something that you already know how to do instinctively is quite an odd thing, actually. But it was fun and it was interesting. And because I went to parochial school right from the very beginning, I also heard different types of music growing up. In Catholic school, a lot of the sisters would play like, Willie Nelson or John Denver, and they would play all different types of music that I didn't hear. So from the beginning, I also was very interested in learning about things outside of my own cultural experience. But not to fast forward too much, but when I speak about, when we speak about the term of inspiration, when I was at Manhattan School of Music, I went to a presentation that Hilda Harris invited me to at the school. And I don't remember the instructor, but I remember the name of the presentation. It was called Chanter Autrement, Singing Differently. And I remember that day just really, my entire perspective as to why I sang changed, because at that point I had become an accomplished opera singer and I didn't really sing gospel as much. And then I started, at that time, we sort of did this sort of quasi hypnosis where we closed our eyes and we had to take our minds back to a time when we were inspired to sing. And so instantly my mind went back to, 1988. I don't want to really age myself, but okay. But it was 1988 Wolseley Hall, New Haven, Connecticut. I see this beautiful Black woman with her hair snatched back with this bright red gown walk out, and it was Kathleen Battle. And that's where my mind took me that day at Manhattan School of Music in 2013 about when I was inspired to sing. And I began to cry in class, and I realized that what the tears were about. It's because when I started studying formally, I lost a little bit of my joy for singing. It started to feel like a chore. And so I told myself, because I guess it's a narrative that could make sense. I grew up in the inner city in what they would call the ghetto in New Haven in the projects. So for me to be an opera singer was very unique from the start. But I told myself, and because of some of the narratives I heard and some of the articles I read about myself, inner city girl makes it out singing opera, or inner city girl is rescued singing opera, or, inner city girl sings her way out of the jungle. And, really those are news headings that I read as a kid. So I began to adapt that narrative, like, oh, music rescued me. But that day, when I was sitting in that classroom, I realized, like, I didn't sing because I was desperate. I sang because I was inspired by Kathleen Battle. It makes me a little emotional thinking about it, because for some reason, when I started singing music, European music, somehow it meant something different to me that robbed me of something that was very central to my inspiration for singing in the first place. So I realized in 2013 that I sang because of inspiration and not desperation.
Wow. Mic drop. Can we insert that here? Yeah, it's so interesting. I feel like the story is so similar for me. Like I said, I grew up singing, and specifically in church, and watching my family and my parents sing. And so there was always this kind of connection to me about what music and what singing could do for others. It was never really about me singing. It was always about, wow, people really feel affected when someone sings like that, And I wanted to take that with me. I wanted to learn. And when I actually learned that I could go to school and study, singing, that was what I was hoping. I was like, somebody needs to teach me how to make people cry in the audience, because, I want to make sure this is all together so that I'm not worried about it, so that I can effectively communicate. And that for me was the callback. If, like you said, Dr. Jackson, it's like you go through all of this study of technique and technicalities, and making sure that you're posturing and your breath support. And then you have a realization one day of why are you doing this? Why did you choose to sing in this way? Why are you choosing to sing opera? Why are you choosing to, as opposed to all the many facets or genres or mediums that you could use to express yourself? Why this one? And it was really the idea that as a performer, as an artist, as a singer, when I stand on a stage, I am not there. I'm hopefully being a medium for someone to experience whatever it is that I am talking about, saying, feeling, expressing, and that is what music can do for people. And so it's definitely what inspires me today to do the type of work that I do and to be singing. But it is, in some cases, it is in opposition to the traditional classical field that we know so deeply, because a lot of that path is very what's the word, rigid, and in the way that you must go down this way, you must be technically X, Y, and Z in order to be an effective singer. And I felt like what somebody was trying to make me was a good singer, and what I wanted to be was an effective communicator. And that for me was the difference. So, okay, yeah, that's what inspires me.
Fantastic. That's so great. Yeah, I mean, I think we, especially us at Opera Next Gen, and I mean, in my own teaching, it's really important that you see yourself represented. You see people like you that do the things you want to do, and then you realize that even though that there's this rigid path, like Rob was saying, that there's so many different ways to figure out what brings you, brings the goal, brings you joy, and really brings you to this career in this music. Classically, gospel, like all genres. I mean, singing is singing, and it's just a cool. Ah, man, it's very inspiring. Okay, anyway, there's more questions. All right, we call this a portfolio career. In terms of a portfolio career, how did you merge your experiences, passions, or hobbies into creating this defined career that you have today? Your path, like putting it all together.
Um, I don't think I had a manual for any of that. What happened is once I realized I sang because I was inspired, my path began to shift just very naturally. And so then I found fitness. Fitness was something that helped me to reconnect to myself. It's very interesting how I felt disconnected from myself for a very long time. And fitness helped me to just sort of reconnect to that. And then I just started to become really obsessed with it and started doing natural bodybuilding and competing. I'm like, what am I doing? But it just seemed a natural progression. And then as it goes, I decided that I wanted to find a way to give back, because in New Haven, where I'm from, I would meet a lot of kids who wanted to take voice lessons, but who could not afford it. So I decided that I was going to, figure out a way to make it possible. So I founded Passion, Purpose, Gift, Passion, Purpose Project. And just so happens that those three pillars are the most important in my life. And it's how my portfolio is aligned, so to speak. So my gift is my ability to sing. My passion is mind, body, soul building, right? And my purpose is service to others through nonprofit and teaching. And so at one point in my life, I felt like I needed to find a way to organize myself because I was gifted in so many ways. It seems gift, passion, purpose was just the perfect way of being able to align those things. And it wasn't, like I said, I didn't have a manual. No one taught me any of this because, like LaRob was saying, we're mostly taught in opera, there's only one way and there's only one technique, and being perfect is the only way you can have the career. And it seems to me as singers of color, and in particular African-American singers, opera singers, to me, it seems that our path never has been a direct path or a simple path. I think part of what it means to be a person of color singing a predominantly European styled music is that we're going to have non-traditional ways of getting there. And for some of us, it's unfortunate we learned that the hard way. And I wish there were ways for us to understand that from the very beginning of our careers, that we, by our very nature, do not have to follow a traditional path. And so many of us have been in pain over this and either stopped singing or all of a sudden just decided that they wanted to find other ways. And if that's the way you diversify, then that's cool at the end of the day, but it's a tough lesson to learn. And I'm grateful that I didn't learn it that way. I always followed. Once I learned about what inspiration mean in 2013, I followed my path as it would lead me. I just listened to that intuition. And so that's my answer. Gift, passion, purpose are the ways that I organize my portfolio, if you will. Yeah.
For me, I think definitely it was, things just kind of came as they did. I don't think I strategically did anything up to a certain point. There came a certain point where I was like, okay, this has been working for me. I'm gonna just do this. But for a while, it was trying to navigate, as Dr. Jackson is saying, like this very particular path that I was told I needed to take. Immediately when I started taking voice lessons, and especially when I got to college, it was like, you need to be doing these things because you have to be here. And I was like, okay, all right, well, I'm gonna do those things. And I would do those things, and you know, little things would come up, and it would be fine. But I was so focused on what the other person or someone else was telling me I was supposed to be, that that was all I was focused on. I can't let these people down. And especially as a Black opera singer, as a Black artist stepping into a predominantly white field, it was like, oh, okay, there was even more pressure from myself to succeed. And so I was working hard. I was taking voice lessons. I was doing young artist programs. I was going. And then I realized, you know, again, I came back to myself and I was just like, why am I doing this? Because it didn't feel like why I started doing it. It didn't feel like where I began. And this was also at a time where I was just kind of having this reckoning about what I had been taught versus what I had experienced, and how those never met until I forced them to. And so I really took a moment and I was like, I spent 4 or 5 plus years, I mean, you know, studying the European music, and I'm learning, post grad, I'm learning about Samuel Coleridge Taylor. Post graduation, I'm learning about Howard Brown. I'm learning about Charles Lloyd Jr. I'm learning about Florence Price, Margaret Bonds, you know, Undine Smith Moore, names that I should have known in school. Someone should have been teaching me about these classical composers who looked like me, who had stories that I had experienced, who that I could connect with. And so I became frustrated with the idea that this wasn't being taught. And so I did all of this research and I was like, you know what? I feel like because these stories exist, that means that there is a huge community of Black and Brown artists who are not being represented effectively in this field. And so I started looking for those pockets. And that came, you know, through the work that I was doing with community engagement, finding the schools, the youth, the different organizations that were doing the work that I found so important, you know, for their communities. And then, you know, started really taking that seriously. It became so important to me to see me reflected in this field. And I mean me as in my community and other communities that are so often misrepresented in the field. So I started doing a bunch of community work as it pertains to the arts. And then from that grew, you know, my organization Hearing in Color, and here I am. So it's just kind of, it became necessity almost to be the artist that gets to tell a story, but also to be the organizer that gets to open a door and say, you have a story that needs to be told. Let's figure out how you can tell it the most effectively. So yeah, that's how Portfolio came into my existence, I guess.
Perfect. This is great. So actually, this leads perfectly into the next question, which is more of a discussion. So tell us more in sort of your own detail about your organizational and entrepreneurial pursuits, sort of, you know, what you're really actively involved in and how, you know, you sort of gave us the how you got there, but like what these organizations are like really, really just engaged in.
A few things. Well, I already talked a little bit about my nonprofit Give Passion Purpose, and the mission is to provide resources to kids in underrepresented communities to be able to afford applied lessons in music, right? But also mentoring is a big thing. For about 27 or 28 years, I realized that I had been essentially mentoring kids through singing. Because many of them, you know, aren't going to college for it. You know, they just want to get in the a cappella group in their school, or they want to sing in choir, or they just want to get in the musical. And when I realized that the work I was doing was not really about the voice itself, right? But was about so many other things. During the quarantine, I started a Facebook group called the Mentoring Forum for Emerging African American Singers. And every Friday, I would invite a friend to come and speak, you know, whether it was Lauren Flanagan or George Shirley or Catherine Malfitano or, you know, Lawrence Brownlee. Like, I invited all of my friends, okay, I need y'all to come and talk to my babies every Friday, because right now they're not sure what's happening in their lives. Many of them were emerging from their graduate programs, thinking about YAP programs. And now everyone's sitting at home wondering what is happening. So I thought one of the ways I could contribute, instead of me moaning about the jobs I lost, I did not do that. That was not my bag. I decided I was going to reach out to young people who were just getting started. I'm like, if I'm affected, I can only imagine how they're affected, and they're just getting out of their programs. And it turned into this thing, and I asked Indra Thomas to be a part of it, and then it became an initiative that was then supported and funded by my nonprofit. So I started giving money to some of the participants, and we did this vocal competition where they submitted videos. Just had to find ways to think about, this is happening, but I'm not going to let it stop me from helping others. So that's how my mentoring became more organizational, right? But here at Western Carolina University, what I've brought to the program in just a short amount of time is community. In so many programs, voice and vocal styles are separate. If you're a jazz singer, you're over here. If you're a classical singer, you're over here. If you're this, you're over here, over there. I'm like, but why? How does that help a young life to separate them from their colleagues? So we're going to have community. That's what we're going to do. And so just this past Thursday, it was so beautiful. For the first time, probably in the school's history, they did a combined voice recital of all vocal styles and vocal types. There were 12 singers. I created some commentary. The theme of the concert was home. So I decided, for you, home can be anything. It could be a person, a place, a feeling, a thing, a furry animal, a tree. But I need y'all to bring your heart to the stage. And when I'm telling y'all, those kids sang, and the responses that I got from my colleagues just overwhelmed me. I mean, many of them were like, I didn't know those kids can do that. And those kids have been there much longer than I've been. Those kids are in their third and fourth years at this school. Many people were just flabbergasted, saying that, we've never seen anything like this here, with kids singing from their hearts and singing from their souls. And so now what I'm doing is I'm bringing what I've been doing, on my own into an institution, and I'm finding ways, and I'm going to find a way to codify, write it down, and create a program where the prerequisite is sing from your heart. If you're not bringing your soul and heart to this, you got to wait for the next one. Because at the end of the day, to continue to pressure these kids to be perfect and sing perfectly is not helping them to be expressive artists. So that's what I've been doing. And I am so grateful. I've been very lucky to walk into a program that actually needed me to be there. So I didn't walk into a program where it's like, I got to fall in line and do what they've been doing, because it hasn't been done, right? And my department chairs and the folks who've been there for a long time have been very, very, very supportive. And I know that's unusual. So that's what I'm doing.
It's amazing. Thank you, Dr. Jackson, for all of the work that you've been doing and are doing. I think, so yeah, I think Hearing in Color started because of the research that I was doing about art songs and just music written by composers that were not white, simply put. I think I was doing all this research. I started singing and learning this music, and I was like, am I the only person who's experiencing this? So I really started reaching out to friends, other, artists of color. And I was just like, do you know about any other composers that, you've heard of or anything? And they would be like, yeah, there are thousands of them. And we want to sing this music, but we just haven't had the opportunity. So I was like, okay, let me see what I can do. And at the time, there was a journalism magazine or digital magazine called Scopy Magazine, who was doing a summer series. And they called me to put on a concert that featured spirituals specifically. And I was like, oh, okay, this might be an opportunity. So I changed it. And instead of doing spirituals, we did art songs by Black composers. And people were just so like, oh my God, we've never heard music. And I was like, yeah, why is that? And then other people would come to me and be like, well, there are all these like Filipino composers too who create like kundiman and like all of these different art songs. And then there are Latinx composers and Asian composers who are composing all of these different. And I was like, okay, so what I'm hearing is this seems like an avenue to explore. And the elevator pitch basically goes, what started off as, short recitals in coffee shops turned into the Hearing in Color today that just Friday produced a world premiere opera of Steve Wallace. He's a composer based out of New York, composed a very brief chamber opera based on the Nas song Undying Love. And so I don't know, I feel like what I wanted to do was start amplifying the work of these composers and thusly amplifying the artistry of the, singers of color who had been waiting on the sidelines to tell their story, save for needing to learn and sing Mozart and Schubert all day long, every day. And this is, again, no shade to Mozart and Schubert. We love Gretchen Amspenrad. We love some Magic Flute. Listen, we're here for the music, but there's room for everyone. There's room for all of this music to be heard and celebrated and performed. And so Hearing in Color is this producing organization that gets to, challenge ourselves with prioritizing the stories of those who have been misrepresented or overlooked because there is such a large favor for what is traditional or typical in classical music. And especially if we want to see classical music into the future, we really have to start telling a more expansive story. And that can't happen if we stick with what we knew. So that's where we are.
Awesome. So cool. Y'all are both doing incredible work, just amazing work, bringing everything up to the fore and just, making sure people are aware of the fact that there is more to what we do. It's not just, as they say, the lady in the big, the Viking horns, shouting on top of a horse, let's see. So you're both incredibly busy people, in charge of organizations, really just diversified. Going through your bios, it was really hard to cut anything out, really. So can you talk about the challenges that you sort of face managing such a diverse portfolio of interests and, effective learning things, as well as sort of what that balance means to you in your own personal life, because I know as in my own life, the work-life balance becomes really difficult, but with all of your diverse and being a portfolio artist, like how do you find time to take care of yourself, take care of your organizations, take care of your own passion for singing? How do you balance everything?
That's a great question. It's interesting. These days, I just turned 50 this year, right? So I decided that, okay, I'm sorry, y'all. Yeah. So I decided when I turned 50 that I was not going to do anything that I didn't love anymore. Like, that's it. I'm sorry, if it don't have a real high note in it, Oh, well, get you a recording of Kathleen. I just decided that I have all these gifts, but I'm trying to be all things to all people. And then I realized that I need to prioritize myself in this. And that means for me, prioritizing the needs of young folk. So for me, I feel like when I am thinking about young people and the greater good of people, it doesn't feel like work to me. It never has felt like work to me. It has always felt like what I'm doing because I love to do it and there is a need. So I feel like I'm caring for me when I'm caring for others. I know that might sound a little cliche, but it's incredibly giving. Like there's something that we all gather and feel and sense after we've performed a concert, right? And I have some stuff coming up that I'm preparing for right now, dusting off these vocal cords for, right? But there is nothing like knowing that you said something to a young life and you changed their life. You changed their perspectives. I mean, I can give you one example of this. There's a young student here who is a freshman. She has a phenomenal instrument and she's studying music education. And I said to her, she sang Home from The Wiz, right? In this concert, a white girl, right? And she sang the crap out of it. She sang it with soul, with her own idea of what soul is. Like, I was so proud of that girl for just doing it. And I said to her afterward, I said, do you understand you could do both? Like, you can be an educator and you can sing people down. You could do both. I said, I'm doing both. And she looked at me with her mask on, but I can see all the expression in her eyes. Like, how, literally, she said to me, how do I do that? And I said, you let your voice lead you. Because that's how fierce your throat is. Do the work, but your instrument is so dynamic, at least in this area of the world, in Appalachia, very few people are going to be able to outsing you. And then you'll move to other areas with that confidence and other areas with that confidence, right? So at the end of the day, caring for young lives, I feel like I'm caring for me because I get really annoyed when adults aren't doing what they're supposed to do when they're in charge of young people. I get really upset. And so I focus so much on the needs. And right now, kids are really going through. Kids are depressed. They have anxiety. They have all kinds of different issues, emotional issues. Some of it is tied to, COVID and being separated for many years, for many months, and a couple of years, it seems, with the rest of the world. But a lot of it was already there even prior. It just sort of exacerbated it. And so I feel like caring for kids through the study of music is my calling and it is my priority. So whatever other things I have going on in my life, it has to complement that. It has to be a part of the gift, passion, purpose, those three pillars. Anything outside of that, for me, it's just a sign that it's not what I need to be doing right now. So that's my answer to that.
I'm going to give maybe it's not an opposite to what Dr. Jackson is saying. It's just a different perspective. I think for me, I do feel overwhelmed by all of the things that I'm doing. But I think it's because I'm at a place right now where it feels like, I'm doing has to be the thing, or there's just a certain point that you might get to in your artistry, in your career, if that's what we want to call it, or something that like you start to feel like, okay, I really got to make this a thing because people are really hoping that this is going to be a thing, or they may be putting pressure on you. And there's a part of me now that is so I'm learning to dispel those things. I'm learning to kind of set those aside and really focus on the why of what I'm doing. And to kind of go back to the points earlier, we spend so much time in school learning about the do's and don'ts. and we don't take time to learn about the whys. And for me, that revelation of why I sing was really helpful in establishing a boundary around my artistry and my gift. And I think that's really important for a lot of young artists, especially in that weird, nebulous limbo of just graduated, gotta figure out what to do next. Because you're already walking away from college with 1,000 people who are saying, can't wait to see you at the Met, you know, and that's great. But what they're not saying to you is that one path that everybody is walking down, you don't have to take that path. You can also go that way. And there's a shortcut probably up the road this way. And you might want to take the long way even. It's a scenic route. It might get you there a little bit later, but you'll get there. And I just wish that that was highlighted. I think I saw somebody in the chat. Yes, we're not taught that there are more ways than one to get to wherever it is. But I think, and I think I might have heard Denise Graves say this once, that there is no it. I think we teach ourselves so much that the it is getting the call from the highest paying company to do the highest paying thing. When in actuality, what I would hope is that you get to do what you love, as Dr. Jackson is saying. And for me, what I wanted to be doing was communicating with people. I wanted to connect with people in a way that I wouldn't normally, exactly. In a way that I wouldn't normally do so. I think, you know, it's interesting. If I did not become a singer, if I never decided to study music, I would have been a psychologist or a linguist. And both of those things are exactly what I get to do with singing, which is so interesting for me. I get to study languages, which is a way for me to connect with people. It's a way for me to talk to people who don't speak my, original language. And I get to kind of dive deep into these emotions that maybe I haven't even experienced, but I get to convey them in a way that allows for somebody else who's experiencing something to feel what it is that I'm communicating. And now with Hearing in Color, I get to allow others to come in and share those same things. So I feel like we're kind of connecting, these different communities and artistries together in a way that really allows people to just be humans together. And I agree, Dr. Jackson, that is what's fulfilling, and that's what propels you into the next job, the next task. It may feel extremely daunting and tiring when you're in it, but as you mentioned, the feeling that you feel when that one person comes up to you after the show and says, oh my goodness, this was something that I have never experienced before. That means so much. It means so much. And I don't take that for granted, because it lets me know that at least one person felt connected to something that evening or at that time. And so it's challenging to navigate all of that, to understand that the path that you are being given is not necessarily the path that you have to take. It's challenging to also recognize when you're taking on too much and when you need to set the boundary and say, okay, I'm going to pause here and reevaluate. That's all okay. Which is another thing that people do not teach you. Please take the break. You can take time. You have time. And then also just kind of hearkening back to the why of what it is you're doing. That will propel you and catapult you into your destiny, really, is by staying connected to what got you, where you are right now.
I just want to add something really quickly. Sometimes it's just giving kids the permission. It's that simple sometimes. Oh, they go, oh, I could do that? I'm like, yeah, you could do that. Who told you could do that? Like literally, that has been my experience here at this school. These kids don't know that they can do that, whatever that is. And then they get up there and they do that. And then all the adults who have been teaching them theory and music history and all that, they're sitting back like, I didn't know that kid had that. So that's when you know you are empowering young people, is when the adults around them don't really believe they have something special and don't aspire to teach them this. All of a sudden, you're sitting back ministering to the adults. And that's what those kids did on Thursday, because not everybody is able to present with their heart, adult or young or whatever age, because that requires a sense of vulnerability and allowing yourself. And there are a lot of people in powerful positions that don't know what it's like to teach with heart or perform with heart, or to allow their vulnerability to come through their artistic expressions. So what those kids did really was inspirational to everybody in the theater, including their professors who were there watching them. So I just wanted to add that as well. Empowering young people is what mentoring is all about. It's just saying, yeah, you can do that. And I don't know why you didn't think you could do that. I don't know what made you think you couldn't do that. So just giving them the permission sometimes is all it takes. Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. Just agency. It's wonderful. Okay, so we have a question each from the audience, and then I have a sort of wrap-up question after that. So we'll actually start with Dr. Jackson. This is from Emily. So I'm just going to read it verbatim. So you are so busy and enterprising. How do you manage your day? Do you have a planner? Do you have a mindfulness practice? Also, as you navigated some of the most prestigious programs in your field that are also PWIs, what role did mentorship have on your experience as you came up?
Great. So I'll answer the first one. So basically, in the morning here in Western Carolina, it's really very beautiful. There are mountains all around. It's so gorgeous here. It's not a lot of diversity, but the nature it's so gorgeous. And that's what I take with me. When I drive in the morning, usually I would turn music on and listen to Prince or Beyonce and just like block out everything I'm thinking on the way to work. And I told myself I was not going to do that anymore. I was actually going to drive to work without music, without listening to Beyonce, without listening to rap, and just like, what am I thinking when I'm driving to work? What is in my mind? So as I'm driving and I'm silent, things will pop in my head. And I'm like, oh, I'm concerned about that. I didn't know I was concerned about that. So being in silence and driving to work, which is about a good 15 or 20-minute drive, by the time I arrive and I park, I know exactly what I need to do. I also understand how I need to behave as well, because sometimes when you're not aware of how you're feeling, you can bring that into the space. So that's what I do as well, Emily. Early in the morning, I get in the car, I don't turn on music, I look at the beauty. Even if it's an overcast, which there is a lot in the mountains, I will even tell myself, like, it's still beautiful. It doesn't have to be just the sun, we need rain. So I will even find the beauty in the gloom in the mountains in the morning if it's not sunny. So that's how I want to answer that first part. What was the second part of the question?
So, as you've navigated some of the most prestigious programs in the field that are also PWIs, what role did mentorship have on your experience as you came up?
Wow, I can't even tell you, like, seriously. Okay, let me start with the University of Michigan. George Shirley, first African-American tenor to sing at the Metropolitan Opera, was my teacher. I was 18 years old. I didn't know there were other Black opera singers in the world but me, and maybe Leontine Price when I saw her on that United Negro College Fund commercial in the 80s. So I met George Shirley. I was like, oh, so I'm not weird. And when I tell you, and I won't go on too long about him because I will break down into the ugly Oprah Winfrey cry. But when I tell you that George Shirley he saved my life. He gave me hope. He made me believe. Mr. Shirley was everything to me. I can't even tell you. He's such a man of dignity. If you never met him, you should try to meet him. because he's one of the greats who is still living amongst us. So you should reach out to him in any way. Like Mr. Shirley was like my father. I never really had, my dad was not able from mental illness. So Mr. Shirley was like my father for 4 years. And every summer I followed him off to Aspen. He taught me so many things about life. And I remember my senior year, you know, Mr. Shirley realized that I was kind of coming to a crossroads and I was starting to stress out a little bit. And I had already decided I'm never leaving Aspen. I meant to say Aspen or Ann Arbor. I just decided I was never, ever going away from this man. I was going to stay wherever he was. I was going to stay. And Mr. Shirley told me, I'll have to say this. He said, get out of Ann Arbor because some people will have their careers here and you're going to have your career elsewhere in other places. And I couldn't believe that. That's such a strong example because sometimes voice teachers can be too much, can make, get their fingers in and make you believe that they're gonna make you and they got all the answers. And then you stay with them longer than you should. And it's not that they don't have more to teach. It's just that it's nice to move away and learn different perspectives. George Shirley could have done that. And I'm telling y'all, if he had done that, I would still be there right now. That's how much I would still be there in Ann Arbor. But he told me, get out, go. Right. So George Shirley for undergrad. For grad at Yale, I studied with Lily Tricazian. I don't know if you know her, but she was an Armenian mezzo soprano contralto. Amazing 4'11" short Armenian woman who just was adorable and taught me how to have stage deportment, how to work with maestros, when to talk to the maestro, when not to talk to the maestro. She told me how maestros have big egos and you need to be very careful about approaching them about anything during rehearsal. Find them during the break, find them during the lunch break. Go over, acquiesce, maestro, maybe it's me. I'm sure it's me, maestro. But I feel really at this point in the orchestra, I'm really not with the orchestra. I know it's me. So Lily taught me how to talk to conductors. And then when I went to the Houston Grand Opera Studio, it was Gay Letha Nichols. You know, when I went there, I was like, oh, there was a bunch of Black folks in that program when she was there. Nicole Heaston and Jonita Lattimore and Eric. And I was like, wow, this is nice. This is one of the most important programs in the country. And it was very diverse. I loved it. So Gay Letha in Houston. And then I took some time off and sang for about 10 or 15 years and decided to go to UConn. And when I was at UConn, it just happened to be my musicology teacher who was my role model. And he was on my committee, on my doctoral committee. So at every stage of my life, I had this one person, and that's why I'm so passionate about mentorship, because it is absolutely essential for kids. It is so essential. So I hope that answered your question.
Oh, fantastic. And then Emily has a question for LaRob. Again, I'm going to read it as she sent it to me. I saw in your bio that you are from Maryland, but you have obviously become deeply involved in the community and created community in Chicago. What do you love about doing your work in Chicago? Is there anything anything you find limiting about that? Do you have any advice regarding the choice of location for young administrators, singers, community organizers?
Emily came prepared today. Okay, she said, I'm going to ask the questions. Wow. Okay. So yes, I came to DePaul. I came to Chicago to study at DePaul. Sight unseen. I had never been to Chicago, save for the audition. And I came here by myself. I did not have any friends, any family, no one. And I really had to navigate this big city by myself. It was a change for me, particularly because even when I was in high school studying classical music, it was a predominantly Black high school. So all of the students were Black. So my exposure to classical music and to the classical, culture even was very Black. And then I came to DePaul, which was a PWI, private PWI, Catholic, you know, this little Black boy from DC who was Pentecostal and had never really spent significant time around white folk is now planted in Chicago, one of the biggest, most segregated cities, surrounded by nothing but white folk and who are Catholic. I mean, it was just a complete culture shock. But I met friends. I found, a base, if you will, of understanding. I started to open up. I started to want to experience different things. And Chicago really feels like home for me because I had to kind of grow up here. There was a lot that I was tied to in DC that I feel like I had to really kind of break myself loose from when I came to Chicago. So it does feel like home, and finding the community here, being connected with the Black singer community, the Black artist community in Chicago has just been so important and pivotal to me. So what was the question? I just want to make sure I'm answering.
What do you like, I mean, you kind of answered this. What do you love about working to Chicago? Are there things that you sort of run up against in working in Chicago? And then, especially like a lot of us in Opera Next involved are young and sort of on the crux of maybe moving to a major city. And what advice do you have to give for like where we choose, or like if we shouldn't choose, or with that process?
For sure. Yeah, I'll answer the last question and then go back. So for me, I wanted to, after a certain point, I wanted to just experience something different. And a big city allowed me to do that. It allowed me to be exposed to so many different cultures and people in a way that DC, I was living in like Maryland and DC, and I was young enough where I wasn't brave enough to really kind of do this type of work in DC at home. So being in Chicago and being forced to really experience different cultures, people, really helped me to see the importance of that. And if I had to offer advice, I would say, look at the community that you are in and ask yourself if it feels homogenous and if it feels like there are perspectives that you are missing because the community that you are in is static. And that doesn't mean your community is bad. It doesn't mean where you are is a bad place and that you need to get out at the first, light. It just means in order for us to progress as, a people, we really have to start understanding the what and why of everyone. And cities happen to present more of an opportunity for you to do that than you think. And even though Chicago in its current state is very kind of pockets, I feel like I was forced to find not only why there were pockets, but really kind of find a place that made me feel comfortable with learning about other things and other people. So I would challenge you or anyone to really kind of break the idea that you need to stay in one community. That does, again, find your base, have home, but explore. Why not? Like you said, you're young, and your artistry is young. That's what is really important here, is that like there's so much more artistry to come from you, when you take the time to really kind of explore. And I feel very blessed that I was able to kind of be in the position that I was, to explore in the way that I did. So there's that. And then I think challenges, I won't say that I came up against too many challenges, DC versus Chicago. I think it's just that though Chicago is a very big city, the Black classical community is very tight knit. So you really kind of overlap in different areas. And what I'm trying to do now is connect all of the art sectors in a way together. There are Black jazz musicians, there are, just musicians around Chicago that are so interested in the work that, you know, we all can do together, but it really requires a diligence and an understanding of all of those communities that I hope to get, because again, Chicago is very vast. DC, I felt like, you know, is I am, the people are, whoever's watching this, if you're from DC, I'm not throwing shade. Y'all know I love my people. DC for me, it felt like there was not, it's not big enough in the way that it will allow me to like really grab from different places. I wanted to just kind of have a little bit more at my disposal, if you will. So yeah, I hope that answered the questions. I feel like I went all over the place.
Oh no, that was great. That was great. Covered it very, very, very well. This has been fantastic, just wonderful. I have one last question before we go, and you can enjoy the rest of your wonderful Sunday evening. But what advice or words of encouragement or action can you give to potential or current portfolio creatives? You know, what is the most important thing that you want someone leaving this webinar to really take home and sort of add to their life?
I would say really just making sure that you understand who you are, and perhaps what LaRob was saying about the why, because at a certain point, we're always going to reach, you know, bumps in the road. I mean, that's where all the lessons come from, for sure. But I find that when we're true to ourselves, when we do reach a crossroads, it's the ones that we need. It's the one we need to move to the next level. Sometimes we're reaching bumps in the road that we really like because we detoured a little bit or compromised a bit. You know, it's still lessons to learn in that. But I found that when I reached a point in my life when I understood why I existed and why I do what I do and what was important to me and who was important to me, then what I ate and who my friends were and how much time I would spend doing certain things, it shifted. You know what I mean? So once you establish the why, right? And how do you establish the why? I mean, that's a deep question. I think at the end of the day, it's just thinking about what are some of the lessons you've learned along the way, and what were some of the things you did and you realized like every time you did that, it didn't work out for you. Maybe that's one of those things you should like eliminate from your life. Like I said to one of my students the other day, don't kick the wall and get mad at the wall. You know, you kick that damn wall. I mean, I said that to one of these college students here, because at the end of the day, it's like, if you're being self-destructive or doing things that you find are not building you up, no matter what it is, you're going to have to go back, correct, maybe heal, deal with some of that trauma, and then move forward before you can move forward. So if you can avoid self-destructive behaviors, whether they're big or small, then I find that you'll be closer to purpose, closer to why. Because for me, gift, passion, purpose is all about, you know, what I do is going to benefit the common good. I think if we can think about that, the common good, how can we help community? How can we be in community? Because it's a very American, right? This whole idea of individualism, right? And meritocracy and all that. But as a Black woman growing up in the community I grew up in, I didn't know what individualism meant. We were a community. It was about community. It was about the whole of people. So that would be my advice. Make sure that you are a part. We all have our individual dreams, of course. Just make sure that what you're doing is a part of something that is much bigger, much greater than you, the individual. That would be my answer.
We seriously need to insert the mic drop gif a couple times. Yeah, I mean, you know, I'm really trying to, I know we're trying to wrap it up. You said individualism being an American ideal, and I'm just like, why would you say that right now? Because now I have 50,000 things to say. But I will, I'll close in saying, I think my advice would be that there are a lot of people who will tell you how you're supposed to do your artistry. There are going to be a lot of people, voice teachers included, some with the best intentions in mind. They will tell you what your artistry is supposed to be and where it's going to go. But a part of becoming who you are meant to be requires you to realize that you are the person that gets to make that decision for you. And that is really challenging in this field, because you see, for some people it works, they follow the path and then they got the job, and that doesn't mean that it has to work for you. That it just means that, there are a lot of factors involved, obviously. But I think, for me and for a lot of people, and I feel like I'm really giving advice to myself, is that even when you're going on that path, whatever that path is, what happens is you fall into a ditch, right? And then you sit in that ditch. I'm a very visual person, so stay with me, church. We're walking down the path, right? We fall into a ditch, and that ditch to us signifies failure. It signifies we're off the path. We can no longer continue. We have to give up. And the tools that we grab in the ditch, or the tools that we make in the ditch, are what become your portfolio. So you've fallen into the ditch, and now you're like, okay, well, what do I do? Because you have the option to just stay there. Falling in the ditch doesn't mean that the path doesn't continue. It just means you have to find your way out of the ditch. That means you have to build a tool, find the tools to dig yourself or to climb out of the ditch and keep going. That's what I feel like a portfolio artist is someone who is ready, at the sign of an emergency or at the sign of a dead end, to start building the tracks further. So that's my advice. Don't take the big losses or whatever you want to take everything as a part of your story and continue to write on. There's always so much more for you if you choose to go forward. That's it.
Fabulous. I think we should definitely give panel a round of applause. This probably sounds weird just from my one mic. So again, thank you, Dr. Jackson. Thank you, LaRob, for sharing your time with us and for really, I don't know, I feel really galvanized to, even in my own teaching, to sort of continue to fight the good fight and just, continue to, help everyone understand that there's just so much out in this world that there is to experience, and that every artist has a true voice and a true passion that they need to show, right? And both of your career paths have been so incredible, and you've done so much great work and have not followed this rigid path. And I think it's just a really great example of what we can have as careers in this industry and still find the time and balance, to listen to Prince. That's where I got it from. But so again, I want to thank you for everything. For everyone else, please follow us on social media, searching for Opera Next Gen. And again, we hope to see everyone at Night Trip on December 11th, 2021. It's going to be a fabulous show. They just started rehearsing, and it's a very exciting time. So thank you again, and everyone have a wonderful Sunday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good evening.
Thank you. Nice to meet you, LaRob. You're awesome.